Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM. Hello, welcome to another episode of Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM. I'm your regular host, Abdurrahim Abdullahi, and today I'm here with my co-host, Emily Duncan. This is a follow-up episode of last week's show. We talked about an interesting program that happened in Gulf earlier in the week. Eat, Think, Foods. It was organized by the Ariel Food Institute and SEED at the Gulf Community Health Center. It was an avenue for the federal candidates to give their positions on issues of food in the Gulf community. So Food Farm Talk, as we will always do, we went there to witness the program and to see how everything unfolded at the event. So today we are just doing a wrap-up show and to bring to you some of the voices out there. So without wasting my time, I will turn to Emily to give just a general background. How was your general impression about the program?
Thanks, Abdul. I think this was a great program and an important opportunity for the Guelph community to understand more about the issues of food security and what the federal candidates are thinking about it. And I think it's important to note that these Eat, Think, Vote events are actually happening all over Canada. They've been organized by the organization Food Secure Canada to try to get the issues of food security on federal candidates' platforms. And the Ariel Food Institute, in partnership with the SEED, did an incredible job organizing this event. The turnout was amazing. The room
was full.
It was packed.
I actually wasn't expecting so many people out there. When I was going, I felt like there would just be a few people. But I was really surprised when I got there to see like there were a lot of people out there.
I think that just goes to show how important food issues are to the city of Guelph. And they took this lens of trying to understand these food issues through a food insecurity lens. And one of the statistics that was kind of talked about at the beginning of the event that I still find shocking, it was mentioned on our show last week, that there's 20,000 people in the city of Guelph who are considered food insecure.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
A city of this size.
And that we, in the city of Guelph, our rate of food insecurity is higher than the national average. So this is something that we need our Member of Parliament to do something about.
Yeah, and that's really a shocking statistic, and considering the fact that University of Guelph is here, and we live in an area with very fertile land, surrounded by farms and all those, it's really surprising to see figures like this positioning the city as an area with high food insecurity. So this really goes to underscore the actual reason why the federal candidates need to take these issues seriously. So just to continue and try to understand, can you tell us a little bit who was at the event?
Yeah, so the event opened with a wonderful land acknowledgement by Becca Clayton from the SEED. And then to kind of introduce some of the issues, Dr. Phil Loring and Dr. Maria Corradini from the Ariel Food Institute were there. And they kind of introduced the issue. Phil talked a lot about this issue of food deserts and food swamps in Guelph. And so we learned that a food desert is a place where there's little access to food, but conversely, a food swamp is where there's access to food, but it's not good quality food. And so in thinking about that, Maria also kind of talked about that we need to consider what types of food people are eating and that it needs to be food of high quality.
That's interesting, and it was really an interesting opening to the program, and that sets the tune for the discussions that came afterwards. So we did have 3 candidates that were present at the program. I don't know if you can tell us a little bit about these candidates as well.
Yeah, so I was the first time for me for meeting some of the candidates. We had 3 there. Lloyd Longfield, who is our current member of Parliament from the Liberal Party. Steve Dick, who is the candidate from the Green Party, and Aisha Jangir, who is from the NDP Party. So between the 3 of them, there was a really good conversation about these food issues.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Like for me, this was the first time I come into contact with a lot of these candidates, and generally even getting to know some of the political landscape here in Canada. So it was an interesting experience for me, and I actually thought that yes, this is the way we should go, like tackling each issues and letting like people in positions of power speak to some of these issues. That is really good. So in more general terms, I would say the program was successful. I don't know if what is your impression?
I think it was really successful, and I think that the questions asked were really, really well organized by the people who put this event together. And so one of the first questions that they opened up with were, what aspects of food insecurity do you see as the federal government's responsibility? And the candidates had kind of a range of answers to address this. With Lloyd talked about poverty reduction, Steve Dick talked about creating more infrastructure, and something that I learned was that that came up in the conversation was how Guelph recently received the Smart Cities grant.
Yeah, the $10 million grant to the circular economy.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge achievement for our city, but what I didn't realize was that over 200 cities across Canada applied for that grant, but only 4 received them. So Guelph is really special to receive that money. But we need more, across the country, we need more policy that's addressing these types of food issues. And then some of the next questions that we got into was what policies would the candidates champion, and what should be some of the target outcomes of these policies? So some of the things that came up there was guaranteed livable income, universal pharmacare and dental care, and formation of a local food infrastructure fund. So there was lots of different policy ideas that the candidates were talking about to become champions of food.
Food, yeah. So generally, like for me, what I realized was that there was a lot of talk about food waste as well, and the aspect of the income is something that I've been talking about with people all along. Like, how is food related to income? Like, most people will argue for basic minimum income, and I think it did come out in some of the presentations as well.
Yeah, it definitely did. And kind of speaking to the issue of food waste, the candidates actually all brought up a few different points in relation to food waste. So Steve Dick from the Green Party really advocated that to change industry perspective on food waste, we need policies that work with markets. And Aisha's suggestion was actually a little bit different from the NDP party, that not necessarily focusing on incentives for food waste, but that potentially companies that are producing food waste could be penalized, and that could be using disincentives for creating waste is a possible solution. And then Lloyd brought up again that solution of creating that circular food economy, and using waste as an input and seeing it as valuable is another way to tackle food waste.
Yeah, those were very interesting perspectives, especially with food waste right now. So it was really interesting to see the candidates coming from very different dimensions, and all boils down to who should be held responsible for food waste. While some think it's more of consumer, something is more of industry, and it's also about how do we tackle it. So, as you mentioned, there were responses that are more of incentivizing and disincentivizing, like food waste. So in more general terms, what I see from most of the answers that came out yesterday was the fact that there's really no one way that we could tackle some of these issues that we are facing in terms of food, especially like in Gulf. So that means we might need to use very comprehensive approaches that take a little bit from the different dimensions.
Yeah, and that there's for different things, there's a range of policy solutions. But there was one point where the candidates all wholeheartedly agreed, and this was a question in relation to children in Canada. So approximately 1 in 6 children in Canada live in food insecure households. And so the candidates were asked, is your committee, are you committed to funding a national school food program?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I think there was like general consensus on like national school food program and the issues related to like food insecurity among children, especially when issues of advertisement of like junk food to children as well. That also came out very strongly.
Yeah, I think that they were all supportive and talked about different initiatives that we've talked about on this show before of how the school food program could look, of like whether it is incorporating local food from nearby farms, whether it's a breakfast program or a lunch program. But they all seem to agree that Canada needs to do much better on this. In fact, even a statistic was cited that the UNICEF rating for Canada rated Canada 37 out of 41 for kids having access to healthy food. And I think that's embarrassing.
Yeah, so it's really embarrassing.
Seeing all the candidates agree that we need to do something more on the front of having a national school food policy was really reassuring.
Yeah, that was really great, and I can mention earlier, there was consensus on that. And one other thing that came out that I wanted to touch on was really about how to incentivize farmers, because there was issues around climate change, which is also like a very big hot topic right now. And how do we incentivize farmers to like improve their practices with regard to climate and just general conservation and keeping up the environment, especially there are a lot of reports that are coming out these days about species decline, about we have until 2025 to save a planet and all those things, and agriculture has a very big role to play in that. So it was really good that in one of the questions, I don't know what, I'm not very certain if it was coming from the audience or from the main question, but one of the questions was actually on climate change as well.
Yeah, I think that was an important discussion, that we didn't just talk about issues of food, but we also talked about issues of agriculture, and how it came to influencing farmers to adopt better practices and practices that address climate change. And a few of the different candidates actually mentioned the importance of increasing soil health and increasing soil's ability to sequester carbon. Yeah. So I think that was interesting for people to know that they're relying on good science to develop these policies that will help farmers and also help fight climate change.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially like I mentioned when like the candidates started talking about carbon sequestration and with a lot of issues regarding climate change and whether it is real, it is not real. But I think that was also one thing that there was consensus on, that climate change is a real issue, and definitely the agriculture sector has a role to play in terms of mitigating or adapting to climate change.
Yeah. So the event had such a great discussion, and if people want more information, at the end all the candidates said that they should, for people to get more information, they should check out the various party platforms to kind of see what their full plan is for a lot of these different issues. And something else that was really great about the event is, of course, you can't have a food event without there actually being food there.
Yeah. So I'm going to let us switch a little bit. We will come back to wrap up all the events. But after the event, we did try to talk to some of the candidates, and we talked to some of the participants as well as some of the organizers, and we got their views on the event as a whole. So it's important that the listeners will be able to attest to some of the things that we are discussing as well. What were some of the things you learned from the participants and the candidates?
Yeah, Yeah, so I think that a lot of people who attended learned something about the food issues in Guelph and kind of got a better understanding of where each candidate's platform falls and with align with policies that are bigger than just food. And so one thing that I did want to mention in terms of there being food at the event was that the event was catered by the Seeds Upcycle Kitchen.
Yeah, that was something very interesting to learn. And it's a new initiative, I've been told, in Guelph, that is the Upcycle Kitchen, where they try to upcycle food that would have otherwise been thrown away, to use it to create new products to be sold at cheaper prices. I don't know if for donation or whatever it is, but it's a very laudable initiative. And we've talked about the initiative on Food Farm Talk before, because with the Food Farm Thought Research Association group, one of the groups actually worked on the Upcycle Kitchen at its initial stages. So I think somewhere in winter we did have a discussion, a little bit of this Upcycle Kitchen. And I think listeners who are interested in this can always go to learn more about it and to contribute to this great initiative.
Yeah, it was my first time sampling some of the treats that were prepared by the Upcycle Kitchen, and I just thought that they had done a phenomenal job making sure that there was good food at this event.
Yeah.
But going back to kind of the audience perspectives, I have a clip to play of someone that I interviewed after the event to try to get a better idea of what they learned, what they thought was included, and what they thought could have maybe been done better about the event, or what issues that they're still looking to learn more on. So we'll turn it over to that.
My name is Jude Keith. I'm a master's student at the University of Guelph in the Geography Department. I'm studying food waste, so I attended the event to look for ways that food waste was mentioned, but also generally food security and access and all those things that we know at a institutional research level and how they're being talked about on the policy level by potential political representatives, including our current representative, Loy Longfield. I'm glad that the conversation discussed realistic, but also very important big picture concepts like soil carbon sequestration down to healthcare and transit issues and everything that comes down to getting food on your plate. What I wish there was more of was more specific discussion of food waste upcycling and maintaining access to food while preventing food from being wasted, which I think is this really fine line that's really tough to figure out and really needs some national leadership on. And I think it's such a huge conversation. It's going to need a lot more direction going forward. But in summary, I think that all the parties are thinking about food, but they could be looking more at how the issue presents itself and not relying on the statistics so much. I always find when things like 1 in 6 or 14% or 20% are tossed out, we get a sense of, okay, some people experience this, but what are their specific circumstances? So like case studies might do better to really showcase this, but as politicians, they're looking for the broader issues and sound bites. So I think it took a little bit to get going, but then everybody settled into where they could point out their party's interesting sound bites on these topics. So I think a longer session might have been good, but I think really just more time for questions would have just opened up the conversation that much more. Really glad to see the range of questions that came out.
And on the topic of food waste, did you find that there was consensus or agreement or disagreement about the candidates and the importance of this issue?
I think so. Some points breezed across it and didn't really say that it needs to be given the attention that we as researchers might really know to be the case. Mention of the circular food economy really helped identify that Guelph is looking into this. And I agree with Steve when he says that, yes, more communities should be able to be looking at it at the pilot level. But Guelph's a start, and so I'm really happy. Like, my project is within that project, so I'm happy to have a little bit of an inside look at what the emerging stages look like. It's a tough problem to solve, and so I think that food waste really does need a much larger, much broader platform. And to say that somebody who shops at Walmart because it's the cheapest place to get food shouldn't be going to Walmart, but rather, like, they should just get food somehow. We should all just get food somehow. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. It shouldn't be a corporate issue. It should, like, all of these food bank statistics don't need to be quoted if we take the food bank out of the equation and get food to people by a much more dignified means and much less corporate means. So I think food waste is only a product of the system that we've created. So proportional representation wasn't mentioned once, and I think that really should have been on the table. It's not a partisan issue, and it needs to not be a partisan issue. It needs to be a discussion that's had by everybody. And there's some things that, given a longer conversation or a more in-depth conversation, we could have got into. But I really think that the cooperation on these issues are what needs to go forward. So I was glad to hear a lot of synthesis across the board of national food policies and awareness that the environment and climate change is going to be the major issue to really look at. We can't grow food if we don't have a place to grow it.
Yeah, so we just heard from one of the participants yesterday, and she spoke highly of the program and some of the experiences and what she learned out of it. But besides that, we also tried to talk to the candidates after the program as well. We wanted to get their impression of the entire program and what the program actually meant for them. First, we spoke with the NDP candidate, Aisha Jahangir.
Jahangir, I'm the NDP candidate running for the federal election for 2019 here in the Guelph riding. This was a really great experience. I got to talk to many people who are also all concerned about food insecurity that exists in our own current community and in Canada at large. We talked about possible solutions. There was great engagement. I think it's important for people to understand what each party's platform is and what is each party prepared to do to address this very same issue.
So going forward from what you have experienced today, what are your thoughts in terms of engaging with the local communities, especially issues like income came out strongly in most of the discussions. Yes. What are your impressions about going forward to engage with the local community on food security?
Yeah, I've had some people actually meet up with me after the panel discussion. So I've gotten a few names and organizations within the community that I will be looking forward to meeting and engaging with.
And next up is Steve Dick, the MP candidate from the Green Party, impression of his impressions of the Eat Think Vote event.
I was thrilled by the engagement. Our community showed up in force to learn about food, best practices. How can we make sure that people who need food and who can't afford food, how can we get healthy food to them? So it's great to see the engagement in the community about that. And then talking about how can we grow more food? How can our farms be more productive and have less food waste and more nutrition? Those are the things that I was really excited about. You know what? And I talk about, I'm the Green Party candidate, right? Yeah. So I always talk about climate and how can we have real climate solutions. We need to get the carbon out of the atmosphere, back into the soil. We've actually been losing carbon out of the soil for the last 25 years. We've lost about 2% of the carbon here.
That's a huge number.
It's a huge number, and it reduces the soil's ability to hold water. There's so many ways in which we need to change our farming practices so that we have healthier food and more resilient to climate change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time and good luck.
Yeah. Okay.
One thing about conversations in Guelph when it comes to food, the quality of conversation is always amazing. So the questions from the floor and the interaction, knowing that you have experts in the field that are also asking you questions. So my impression is there's always an intelligent conversation in Guelph when there's food as the main part of it. I mean, there's always lots of other intelligent conversations, but I really enjoy the food conversations. And it also showed the complexity of the issue, that it's an economic issue, it's a poverty issue, as much as it's a scientific issue about how do we develop proper food for the market, and it's indigenous. So the University of Guelph brings all that together through different faculties and makes sure that we're working together to solve complex issues like food.
So what is your impression coming out today to see a lot of community members taking like food as an important issue that they think is important that they come and talk about?
I hope we have a high participation in the vote coming up, and this gives me good hope that enough communities engaged here, but hopefully they go back and tell their friends that this is important to elect people that are going to be focused on improving the planet and improving life and supporting communities.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we just heard from the federal candidates about their impression of the event, and as you can see, all of them spoke highly of the Eat, Think, Vote event. They all were impressed by the turnout and how the community engaged with the event. So we also wanted to understand the organizers, how they felt about the event as well. So we spoke to some of the organizers to get their take.
My name is Becca Clayton, and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator at the SEED.
So what are your general thoughts about today's event? Because for me, coming here, it's been a very good learning opportunity to me. And I know you've been at the center of organizing this. So what is your general impression about today's event?
I think it was really great. It was really awesome to have such a great turnout. It's so exciting that Guelph is so ripe and ready to be having these difficult conversations, because food security is very complicated, and an MP can't sit up there and tell you their 5-point plan on how we're going to be food secure. It involves community coming together and asking hard questions of each other and really figuring out how to collaborate. And so having politicians who are kind to one another and who are answering questions to the best of their ability and who are encouraging and who know what's going on in their community, all of those things are really important. The connection between the university, the government, and the organizations doing a lot of work, and the community members is very important. So it's exciting to see so many people involved.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So from all that you have heard within about an hour of talk, what was the most exciting thing that you actually heard from the candidates?
Oh, that's a great question.
Or one or two questions. Exciting stuff.
I think that having politicians, something that's very exciting to me is having politicians who know how intertwined food security is with poverty and with income-based solutions. So I think that having them talk about school food programs and basic income and like other income-affecting policies like childcare and housing benefits and all of those things are all sort of a mixed bag involved in food security, as well as talking about farms and farmers and local food and the environment, and all of that stuff is so important. But it's really great to have people who want to talk about income, because that's like a massive piece of food security.
So from an ordinary citizen's perspective in Guelph, what message do you have for people who are not out here and who might be listening to like some of the topics that have been discussed today?
I think the message that I would have is that Guelph is a pretty exciting place to be in if you care about food, and that I would encourage you to think about how you can get involved. You can get involved through organizations or through the university or with the politicians directly, ask them questions, and there's lots of ways to get involved with the SEED if you want to do that. And that I think it's an exciting community to be a part of for people who care about food, and I think that I hope that a lot of people will see it as such.
And here is a final clip from another one of the event organizers who wanted to thank everyone who was involved with Eat, Think, Vote.
Hi, my My name is Madeline. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Eat Think Vote event, along with Gina Rex and Kiana Gibson from AFI and The Seed from downtown Guelph. We just want to thank everyone for coming, and the candidates and all the community members. It was a very well turned out event, and thank you so much for the thoughtful questions, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Well, those are the highlights from this week's Eat, Think, Vote event held at the Guelph Community Health Center. We hope that you learned something about the issue of food security in Guelph, and that you hit the polls on October 19th when the federal election happens, and vote for some of these candidates who are all thinking about the issue of food security. Thank you again for tuning in to this week's episode of Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM. We've been your hosts, Emily Duncan and Abdulrahim Abdullah. Thanks for listening and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Food Farm Talk. See you next week for another exciting edition.